There's a stat out there that says like 85% of your success comes from interpersonal relationships, right? How you treat people, how you deal with them. But only 15% of success comes from technical skills or hard skills. But companies spend so much more of their budget on those hard skills and those computer skills. You think about like new technologies that are coming out, or programming, or softwares, or even, like again, if I use sales as an example, even salesmanship skills. So companies spend all this money on that type of training rather than interpersonal training, leadership training, and things like that. When the fact of the matter is, most of your success comes from interpersonal relationships.
All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Winner Circle podcast. I'm your host, Jay Adewole, and today I'm very thrilled to have all of you join us for an empowering conversation titled How to Build Resilient Teams That Thrive Under Pressure. Today, we are joined by Amy Pechacek, founder and CEO of Alpstra Training Solution, a corporate training company dedicated to developing resilient, emotional intelligence, and purpose-driven leaders. Amy's work spans executives, emerging leaders, and professionals across industry, helping teams navigate challenges and also to embrace change and perform at their highest potential. With years of experience in leadership coaching, executive training, and keynote speaking, Amy blends practical strategies with value-driven approaches to equip leaders with tools that strengthens engagement, foster collaboration, and drive high performance. So in today's conversation, Amy will share actionable strategies to build a resilient team, the mindset shift leaders must adopt under pressure, and how emotional intelligence and intentional leadership can transform team morale and results. So I want you to join us today as we explore this conversation. So welcome to the Winner Circle. All right, Amy, welcome to the Winner Circle.
Thanks for having me, Jay. Happy to be here.
All right, you're welcome. So your work in building resilient teams is incredible, and I must say it's very, very inspiring to me when I looked at your profile. So what first motivated you to focus on leadership and team development?
Wow, what a great way to open this. So years ago, when I first entered corporate America, I had been a teacher before that. I was a teacher, an 8th grade math teacher. But when I went to work in corporate America, I worked for a software company. And goodness, Jay, I learned so much at that company. But one of the things was we had a leader there at the organization who was the epitome of what a leader should not do. So the example of bad leadership, let's say. And the people who reported to this particular individual would come to me and pour their hearts out and, vent because of the way they were being treated by this individual. And this individual happened to be the person who I reported to directly. So, and maybe the reason they came to me was because they saw me as their teacher. I was over training and development for that company. But then, after working there for a few years or several years, I had a company called McGraw-Hill Education start to recruit me to come work for them on the sales side of things. And it was really easy for me to move to McGraw-Hill when I was working in this other environment, right? So I go to McGraw-Hill, and my boss, my direct report, the person who I worked for at the time, an amazing man, he was the complete opposite. He was like this unbelievable, inspiring, motivating leader who just helped you to believe in yourself and coached you in ways like if he was coaching you, you felt like he was complimenting you. It didn't even feel like a coaching moment. It felt like he was building you up because he knew he was so gifted in that. And it really started getting me curious. Like, how did I just go from this tyrant of a boss, is how I describe it, to this empowering, amazing, life-giving leader just from one job to the next, right? Just in a matter of days basically when you transition like that. But also because I worked for McGraw-Hill, I worked on the higher ed side, and I was able to go visit a lot of the smartest people in the United States, right? I had access to them. I was traveling to colleges all across the South, all the way from Texas to Florida up to Kentucky, that whole part of the United States. So think about all those colleges. You have LSU, you have Vanderbilt, you have Florida. All of those schools I was going and visiting, and I would get to have conversations with these very, very intelligent people. And I started picking their brain. I talked to a lot of the professors in the business. I talked to a lot of the psychology professors talking about human behavior, but in the business professors, I would ask them about leadership. And I had access to all the textbooks that McGraw-Hill published. So I really started digging into some of these ideas of human behavior and leadership. And as I did, I just gained all this knowledge about it, right? So I was already doing some public speaking for McGraw-Hill because, we would speak at events and things like that. But then people started asking me to speak on the side, and literally they just went hand in hand. I was actually a leader at McGraw-Hill myself. I got promoted to be in a leadership position, but all of those series of events is what led me to just kind of focusing and honing in on being really, really good leaders.
That's a very great experience, and thank you for sharing. So, but how did those experiences influence the way you train leaders today?
So it's very interesting because I truly believe that most people, let's just say, most people aren't born to be good leaders, right? And so you might be a top performer in your role, and you have all of the skills and traits necessarily. Let's just talk about sales for a minute. Maybe you're the best salesperson out there. You are like the top performer, the number one salesperson at your company, and you're a high achiever. You're doing well, you're successful. And so you get promoted into a leadership position. And as people get promoted, they need completely different skill set to be successful as a leader than they did in their role as sales or any other role they might have held, right? But when you get promoted into a position of leadership, it takes a completely different skill set. So one of the things I do is I take new leaders back to the foundations, back to the basics, so to speak, right? We got to unlearn a lot of the things you've been doing, and we've got to relearn how to do this job. So a lot of what I find a lot of times when I work with, especially new leaders, it's a little bit different of how you work with senior leadership teams. But when you're working with new leaders, a lot of them have this doer mindset where they just feel like they have to do everything, and they just feel like they have to take everything off their plate and act off of the people who report to them off of their plates, and they just take it all on themselves, and they work themselves to death, and they get burnt out ad nauseum, right? But one of the things that we do is we talk about different things, different leadership styles and traits and tactics that they can use to be successful. One of them being, as the example I just used, about learning effective delegation. So instead of taking everything off of people's plates, let's now look at what individuals on your teams, what their skill sets are, what they're really good at, also what they're interested in, and where they want to go in their own career. And then let's decide exactly what they should be doing and help them have a path and a plan forward.
So much. Delegation is key, and every organization, every leader should understand this. And if you look at your coaching style, I figured that you focus on combining emotional intelligence with practical leadership strategies. So, what does that blend look like in a real world organization?
Well, emotional intelligence is one of the foundational principles. It's going to impact everything else in business. It's going to impact the decisions you make. It's going to impact how you interact with people, how you treat people. So it's truly foundational. So that's one of the very first things that we talk about in some of my leadership development training programs. But also as I'm working with leaders one-on-one, we have conversations. We might not use the term emotional intelligence, but we actually talk about the concepts of emotional intelligence. And one of the things that's so important is being able, one of the parts of emotional intelligence is understanding how to adapt in a way, your tone of voice, the words you say, how you treat different people. I think in the past, people thought that you had to treat everybody the same. You had to be fair and you have to treat everybody the same. But treating everybody the same isn't necessarily fair when you're dealing with individuals, right? So you have to find the individual's value drivers and then adapt to what works with them. Now, saying that, we also talk about authenticity at Alpstra, and not meaning, authenticity is an excuse for bad behavior at all. But you can absolutely be authentic as a leader and adapt to the needs of others. I can still be 100% Amy Pechacek, but adapt to speak to you in a way that you can hear me, right? And that helps move our relationship forward.
So, why do you think emotional intelligence is often overlooked in leadership training?
That's a really good question, and I don't know that I have the exact answer for but this is what I'll tell you, Jay, is that we've been talking about emotional intelligence for almost 20 years now, and what I see time and time and time again is people might even know what emotional intelligence is, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're practicing it or that they have a high level of emotional intelligence. But if I have to identify possibly the reason people don't spend time on it, I'm going to go back to what I said early on. That's still a foundational principle. And I think a lot of times people, especially executives, once you get to a senior leadership position, a lot of executives have the mindset that they don't need the basics anymore, right? I've got to learn this high level stuff. I've got to learn this really important stuff. And that emotional intelligence stuff, that soft, feely stuff, that's foundational. I'll let everybody else learn that, and I'm going to learn this other stuff. So if I had to guess, I would say that maybe that's why is they feel like it's, too low level for them or it's not important to what they're doing when truly it is one of the most important things you can do to have a successful team is to learn about emotional intelligence and implement it, not just know it, not just head knowledge, but heart knowledge.
One of the things we are going to talk today about is about high pressure situations, stress um when it comes to managing a team,
Mhm.
and we all know that stress and high pressure situation can break a team, is a known fact.
Yeah, that's a lot, right? That's a whole segment right there. There's a process and it's not just an easy, let's just go after it. There's an entire process to creating cohesive teams. And for that, I believe that trust is the foundation. So even though you notice I said emotional intelligence is a foundational concept, but trust is the foundation that is the absolute foundation for a cohesive team. And I believe that I read Patrick Lencioni's book, The Five Dysfunctions of the Team. He's the one who articulated that for the first time for me, and I completely believe it to be true. But if trust is that foundation, then what does trust look like? There's different types of trust. There's something that you call predictive trust, where you've had a relationship with your spouse or your best friend or even a parent. For me, known my parents for 51 years. So I kind of understand, I have a good idea of how they might respond if I'm bringing up a topic because I've known them for a long time. That would be predictive trust. And then you have different types of trust when it's dealing with team members. But one of the trusts that Patrick Lencioni teaches is this vulnerability based trust, meaning that I don't have to stand here and be all perfect. Like literally, I'm a human being. I have flaws. There was only one perfect person who ever walked the earth, and I'm not that person. So being able to admit when I make a mistake and even to be able to encourage other people to take calculated risks, right? Empower people to make decisions, empower them, give them the tools and resources so that they can have autonomy to make good decisions. One of the ways you can do that is you can share your own failures, right? So, tell a story about something you learned, lessons learned early in your career, but you only learned it through failure. Most of us, we learn through failure. And so we pass those pearls of wisdom on to other people, showing them our vulnerabilities. And that's the foundation of trust. And then from there, it goes into different levels of building a cohesive team. There were directives that were just handed down, top down type of management style. And what we're finding is that the best way to get team members to buy into ideas and to trust each other and to work well together is to allow them to have feedback, allow them to give input. If it's their idea, even if, say, we take a vote and there's 7 of us, 3 people vote one way, 4 vote another, the chances are they're going to buy into any initiatives that are adopted and presented and implemented. So there's this whole process that we go through around building cohesive teams with.
All right, thank you for sharing. So, but for you, you train leaders. How do you help those leaders foster clarity and trust in that particular situation?
That comes down to an individual, right? So what's in
Mm,
the way of that individual? What habits do they have? What blind spots? What are their operating systems? How are they
mm,
handling individuals? What do they think about themselves? Like what are the words that they speak about themselves? What is their view of themselves? A lot of people, even at the top of an organization, have imposter syndrome, and we know this, right?
mm.
So they don't feel worthy or they don't feel good enough to be in the chair or in the position they're in. So we have to, when I work one-on-one with people, we truly have to get to the root of whatever is holding that person back. I call it a roadblock.
Mm.
What's the roadblock? What's the stumbling block? What's in your way? Figure out what that thing is, the root cause of it, because if we don't get to the root, we're only treating the symptoms. So we have to get to the root cause, and that truly is a personal, individual thing. And it's not just a blank statement I can give you and say, hey, here's what we do with everybody, because it truly is a one-on-one individual thing. So even when I'm working with a whole room full of people,
Mm.
okay, and not just one-on-one like this conversation that you and I are having, even if I'm talking to a whole room full of people, we can still help individuals get to the root of whatever their roadblock is by having them go through different, questions and assessments and having them reflect and giving them some tools to get down there and figure out what's getting in their way.
All right. Thank you for sharing that. Now, let's move a little bit forward and talk about leadership and team dynamics because, you know, that's the conversation while we're here today. So, how can someone, a leader, the head of a team, whoever it is that's leading the team, develop qualities? And we all know that a lot of leaders have imposter syndrome and they don't even have that energy. Maybe they get there through qualification or they have all the degrees that they need, but they don't know how to even inspire their team members. So, how can someone develop those skills or those qualities if they don't naturally have them? Because some are lucky, just like you said, you were working in an organization, but you just have the leader was not the right leader. He has all the probably the degree and everything to be there, but he doesn't have the qualities of bringing a team together. So how can that person, let's just give an example, how can that person develop those skills if they don't naturally have them? Hey, Winners, have you got a business or brand that deserves to shine? I'm just saying this right now because I'm giving the opportunity for you to advertise on Winner Circle with Jay and connect with thousands of ambitious entrepreneurs and leaders who are about growth. It's all about growth. So whether you are advertising a product or a service, secure your slot as low as $100. So what are you waiting for? Email us at advert@winnercirclewithj.com. Here at Winner Circle with J, we just don't talk success, we create success. All right, see you soon.
Yeah, they're gonna literally have to get honest with themselves and take a good hard look in the mirror and decide the type of leader they want to be. So it truly is a personal choice. But once they decide that, you know what, I can get better, then we encourage them to have like a performance coach or to go
Mm.
to leadership training. And, Alpstra is a provider of that. There are other companies that provide leadership training, but you have to learn the skills. And doing that is going to be things like going to trainings, going to conferences, going to seminars, reading books, listening to seminars, working with a coach, doing things to intentionally move forward and get better. A lot of times, like I said earlier, senior leaders will either they think that they got there because they know it all, right? And so I don't need to learn anything else. Well, I'm here to tell you that I believe we should all be lifelong learners. I'm a lifelong learner. And in order for us to continue getting better, we have to continue learning. An analogy I use a lot of times is human beings are like plants or flowers. So what happens? A plant is either growing and blooming or it's
Yeah.
dying. So if you're
Mm.
not continuing to move forward and you're not continuing to learn, nobody stays still. Your skills are going to get better or they're going to get worse. Another interesting thing, Jay, is that there's a stat out there that says, like or 85% of your success comes from interpersonal relationships, right? How you treat people, how you deal with them. But only 15% of success comes from technical skills or hard skills. But companies spend so much more of their budget on those hard skills and those computer skills. Think about like new technologies that are coming out, or programming, or softwares, or even, like again, if I use sales as an example, even salesmanship skills. So companies spend all this money on that type of training rather than interpersonal training, leadership training, and things like that. When the fact of the matter is, most of your success comes from interpersonal relationships. You have to have that 15%. You have to have that foundation. Other than that, it's how you treat and interact with people. So for leaders, when they're dealing with teams and they are needing to get better and to be a better, more inspiring, positive leader, then literally they have to, again, to summarize, they've got to make a decision that, hey, I'm going to do something different. Like for me, I saw the example of a bad boss and I saw the example of a good boss. So I said, I'm not going to do this. I am going to do that. Right. But then, just like I did, I learned as much as I could about leadership and about human behavior and got to the root of how these things work and how it impacts people. There are all kinds of skills we can talk about and we can learn, but they have to make the intentional decision to get better every single day. I love the saying 1% better every day, because I truly believe that if you have that mindset, actually, Jay, let me tell you a quick story if you have a second. Um, a few years ago, I decided,
Yeah.
I love this phrase 1% better every day. So I was sitting outside of my house on my front porch and I had my laptop and I decided, if I were to get 1% better every day, just for say 100 days, what would that look like? And the mathematical mind in me said, okay, so let's just say I decided I took 1% of my day. So 1% of my day, and it was something like 14 minutes. I don't remember the exact numbers. And I said, okay, I'm going to work on myself, compound interest here, 1% more every single day for 100 days. So I asked my husband, I asked my son, how long do you think it's going to end up being? And, my son might have said something like, man, mom, you're going to have people working on themselves all day long. And my husband said, oh, Amy, you're going to have them out there, doing personal development for 3.5, 4 hours a day. Even if you decided to start at that 14 minutes and work on yourself 1% more of your day every single day for 100 days, it literally
Mm.
comes out to be 42 minutes a day. And so
Wow.
when I'm at these workshops or I'm speaking to people or working with people, I will ask them, Jay, are you worth 42 minutes of your day? Are you
Mm.
worth getting better, doing something to better yourself for 42 minutes out of your day? And I'll ask people that. And then it's up to them.
Mm.
It's a choice.
A big choice. So now that's a good approach. All right. So, but now I want to also talk about strategies for high performing team, or high performance teams. Right. For you, if you're going to give an advice, what are the most effective techniques to strengthen team morale? Techniques to strengthen team morale.
So one thing is that you have to learn how to deal with different personalities. So I teach the DISC assessment, learn communications number one, right? That
Mm.
trust is the foundation, but you have to learn how to communicate with one another. Team morale is going to come down to interpersonal dynamics. So think conflict resolution, think effective delegation, meaning not just delegating things that you don't want to do, but truly giving people tasks that they can do that empower them to innovate and to think for themselves so they have autonomy as an adult. Take the chains off of your team members. For so long, people have been just like, there's so much red tape in corporate America where they have to have approval after approval after approval. Cut the red tape, let people go out and do their job, give them the skills that and the tools to make good decisions, give them the skills and the tools to do their job, support them, encourage them, allow them to grow, and allow them to innovate. Those are all different things that you can do to create a more powerful team, a more empowering team, right? To help your team dynamics. A lot of times you'll see what happens is people will get caught up in politics. Okay. So they get caught up in politics, and this whole politics thing is me focused. So if I'm me focused and I'm only worried about me and my career and how I look, and I don't think about the unity of the team, that one person is the bad apple that spoils the bunch. They can poison the whole group. So one of the things that you absolutely have to do as a leader is that when you have a bad apple, you have to make choices. Are you going to let that person continue to spoil the bunch? Are you going to invest in training and development for them or do coaching with them? Or are you going to cut ties with them? Even if you have like a top performer, again, the sales example, you have somebody who's knocking it out of the park and they are bringing in tons of money into the company every day, but they're toxic and they are being underhanded and undermining, and they are negatively affecting the team. It's too expensive. It's too expensive to keep that person. So you have to make sure you have the right people in the right positions, that you encourage them, you empower them, you give them autonomy to do their jobs. And I believe with all of that in place, then you can start building a cohesive team. I've seen it done time and time again. I've seen teams go from being complete disasters to being like number one teams.
So, but another part of teams that we often overlook is burnout. Most teams, they often face burnout, even in successful organizations that you know. But a lot of people underestimate burnout. So, what are practical ways to prevent burnout while maintaining high performance in team?
You know, the Pareto principle says that 20% of the people do 80% of the work. And here's what
Mhm.
happens. I remember years ago, my uncle told me, like literally, I was in high school when he told me this. He said, Amy, if you want something done, give it to a busy person. He was like the vice president of finance over his company. And that was even his philosophy back then. If I want something done, I have to give it to a busy person. So that 20% of people doing 80% of the work, those are the ones who risk burnout. Those are the ones that you have to look at. The other 80% who are doing 20% of the work, they're the ones that we have to motivate and encourage to pull their weight. So instead of keeping that old philosophy of, I'm just going to give the busy person the work, why not, we kind of touched on this earlier, let's take a really good look at what everyone's doing, what their skill set is, and let's make sure things are distributed evenly. Now, that's one thing you can do. Another thing is that even though technology has been this great thing, like we're so blessed to live in the day and age where we have technology, I would have never met you, Jay, right? We wouldn't be having this conversation had it not been for
True.
technology. So
Mm-hmm.
technology has all these positives. But what we also know is that with technology, you have access to people 24/7. So team members have access to each other 24/7. I've even been guilty of it where texting people on my team late at night, I had an idea, send them a text. And so with that, people are never able to turn off their minds and just kind of unwind and get some rest because of this 24-hour access. There are different ways that you can identify burnout in people, the quiet quitting trend that happened in 2020, and then it became loud quitting, and now we're even seeing people, Jay, in senior
Hmm.
leadership positions
Hmm.
that are quiet quitting. We're seeing vice presidents sitting at their offices watching movies. I've seen it with my own two eyes.
Hmm.
So we literally have people who are quite quiet quitting, even in high positions, senior leadership positions. But one of the things is you have to recognize that burnout, and again go back to the we always have to be growing and developing because we're either growing or dying type of analogy. But truly, that number two thing I think is to have solid boundaries around your technology. Have the conversations with your teams, have the conversations with
Hmm.
senior leadership, have the conversations with your colleagues about what are our boundaries going to be. If there's an emergency, sure, send a text or call or email or whatever the case might be. But if not, there's this thing called delayed send in Outlook where you can schedule your email to go out later. So that burnout is a really big issue. And I do believe that there's a lot of root causes, one of it being the whole technology thing and having 24/7 access to people. But also, I think because back in like 2015, management was so honed in on efficiencies and people just started trimming the fat. And what I mean by that is they started taking away all of the jobs, like the lower level jobs or what they would call fluff jobs. They started, trimming fat. And all of those responsibilities got piled onto the people who stayed. And so these employees were expected to do not only their job, but everyone else's job too. So there are different things you can do to put in place to prevent burnout from happening in the first place, but it's also a matter of educating leaders on what to look for in their team members.
Thank you so much for analyzing that. So let's talk about conflict a little bit because we all know conflict is inevitable in teams. So, how would you suggest, or how should leaders approach conflict resolution to maintain growth?
I don't believe that conflict is always a bad word. In fact, when I bring up the topic of conflict in a workshop or to an individual, I will ask them to tell me what they think about the word conflict before I even start talking about conflict. When you hear the word conflict, what comes to mind? And you'll hear all of these different things, and most of 99% of them are going to be negative. Literally, you will rarely hear somebody say something positive about conflict. But I don't believe all conflict is bad. Okay. If we don't have conflict, then we fall into groupthink, and groupthink is bad. Now, with that said, there's a right way and there's a wrong way to handle conflict. Not good or bad. People have different personalities. People express themselves differently, but conflict just means that I have a different idea that you have, and let's talk about it and let's figure it out. Okay. When people shy away from conflict or they avoid conflict, then you risk not being able to hear from other minds and from other perspectives. And the more perspectives you get, the better your solution is going to be, whatever it is. So I am not one who says to avoid conflict. In fact, I encourage healthy conflict. I encourage conflict, but I encourage constructive conflict. And there's an entire process around how we get people to understand what that looks like. Conflict resolution is a term, a buzzword that's been around for a while. I'm not a huge fan of it because I believe conflict is healthy, but we have to teach people how to appreciate it and how to use it for their benefit.
All right, thank you for sharing. So, another angle of teams we're going to look at is change management. Now, as a consultant, I've, handled the projects yeah, that has to do with change management, and I've had a lot of team members resist that change management. We want it this way. Some just put in their leave and just go and come back and say, no, this is not where we went. For you, because some team members will naturally resist change. We all know that. So how do you coach leaders to engage and inspire these individuals?
Yeah, we have a program on change management. We actually call it change leadership. Some of the things we've already talked about today, but let's get past the pre-work and let's just get right into how it impacts the team, which is what your question was around. And again, we have to get their buy-in. And how do we get their buy-in? We get their feedback. So we ask for the input of anybody it may be affecting, any team member it may be affecting. We might send out surveys. We might do one-on-one interviews with team members, but we also include other departments that might not be directly involved with change, but that are impacted in it in the third circle or, second, third, fourth circle out. So we also bring in people from other departments that change is going to impact, and we get their feedback and their buy-in. And so then we have a really good 360 perspective of what this change is going to look like and how people are going to respond to it. Because you're absolutely right. People resist change. People don't like change.
Almost everyone just don't want change. They just
They just don't
want
want
the
change.
status
Even when
quo.
they say they want change, most people don't. They just don't like it. So you
Mm.
have to get past those psychological barriers, and you have to come out in the open, and you have to be clearly communicating with the team, with your organization. You have to be transparent. You have to do that vulnerability thing that we talked about, but you talk about it every step of the way. And I'll give you an example. I've recently worked with a team that is implementing some automation in their manufacturing and in their warehouse. And some of the automation that they are implementing is going to change the type of jobs that the human beings at that manufacturing company do. So they announced, working with me, we talked about it. They announced to their entire organization the plans. They did they did surveys and feedback forms. They had really in-depth conversations. We put everything on the whiteboard. We heard all the fears, all the ideas, all the topics. And there was really in-depth research done on how do we communicate this to the team to let them know what our plans are, to do it effectively, and to roll it out. And so that's part of dealing with the fears of change. Now, for this particular company, they wanted to reskill and upskill their employees, which is fantastic, meaning they weren't going to do layoffs because of this automation, but because of this automation, what somebody who might have literally been on an assembly line doing before, now we've got to teach them how to read the instrumentation or something like that, right? So I think change management is very important. Change leadership, how you address change is hugely important to whether change is going to succeed or fail. And before, all the pre-work that we didn't talk about, we got right to the part of the people. You have to talk about psychological safety. You have to be transparent. You have to over communicate, meaning it's better to communicate too much than to communicate not enough. And the reason I say that is because I've never met a company yet that over communicated, right? I mean, they just don't. So I encourage over communication because I know it's not going to happen. But if we shoot up here, maybe they'll reach here. But communicate it. And then when the change is implemented, you have to do just in time training. Meaning, if I know change is coming in April of 2026, all right, I can't train my people in September of 2025. That's not just in time. They're going to forget everything I taught them when the change is implemented. So this is for the doers, not necessarily the leaders, but the just-in-time training is, hey, what type of training are we going to give them and when? And we need to do it just in time. And when I say what type is, there's going to be knowledge that they need, but there's also going to be hands-on. So we look at all the different types of training and we create specific training paths for specific roles and specific departments so that
Thank
they
you
don't
for
have that
sharing.
fear. A lot of the fear is not just around change. It's around that they feel like they're going to fail. So we want to
Mm,
give the individuals the tools to be successful in the change. And that's at the end of the day what it's all about.
That's what it's all about. They can be greater leaders to their organizations. And thank you so much for that information.
Hello and welcome back. You guys, the listeners, are my powerhouse. So I have something I want to discuss with you guys today. So before we dive into today's episode, I want to shine a spotlight on an incredible opportunity that could revolutionize the way you approach your business. So now the question is, are you ready to take your business to the next level? Whether you're an entrepreneur, a leader, or a team member striving for excellence, I want to say Point of View Consulting in New York is your partner in strategic transformation. Whether you are in Texas or you are in whatever the city you are in, so far you're in the United States, they are helping businesses transform their business. So they are not just a consulting firm, they are your catalyst for change, a coaching powerhouse, and a branding leader, all rolled into one. At Point of View Consulting, their services includes strategic consulting, executive coaching, brand development, and performance optimization. And one interesting thing about this brand, Point of View Consulting, is right now they're offering an exclusive free consultation just for you. Now, this is your own chance to gain invaluable insight at no cost. Plus, when you decide to move forward with any services, just use the promo code Winner Circle Podcast to receive a hefty 30% discount on your services fee. It's simple. Imagine the transformation you could achieve with an expert guidance and a fresh perspective. So don't let this opportunity pass you by. I want you to visit www.pointofviewconsultinginc.com. So that is point of view consulting nc.com today to book your complimentary consultation and embark on a journey of growth and success. Now, let's get back to the show.
And for our listeners and people who are just joining us on the Winner Circle podcast with Jay, my guest today is Amy Pechacek, and we're talking about how to build resilient teams that thrive under pressure, and we're sharing practical strategies to strengthen team performance and morale. All right, guys, welcome back to the Winner Circle podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Amy Pechacek, a true expert in leadership and team resilience. What really stand out today, in this discussion is how Amy emphasized that strong, performing team don't just happen. They're intentionally built through strategy, emotional intelligence, and thoughtful leadership. So for many listening, leading a resilient team can feel a little bit overwhelming, especially during high pressure periods. I want you to just take a deep breath and get ready, because the next segment of this episode is going to be interesting. All right? So, Amy, for leaders who want to start building resilience but aren't sure where to begin, what's one practical step they can take today to strengthen their team's performance and morale?
Yeah, the word resilience means that they're facing some kind of adversity or a situation that's less than positive or less than desirable. We can go back to that word fear of failure, fear of success, whichever way you want to look at it. But a lot of it's control. They want control. The best thing they can do is just let go of that control, not have to be in control, not have to be perfect. Perfectionism will kill progress and performance, and perfectionism is the enemy of progress. And generally, people who want things perfect, it's all about control. So, one practical step that you're asking me to become a resilient leader is let go of the daggum control. Earlier we talked about allowing people to take calculated risks, not $1 million risks. That's not what I'm talking about, but allow people to take calculated risks. Allow them to fail. Yeah, allow them to fail. Think about, whatever your politics are, Elon Musk with the rockets, SpaceX, that he's shooting up into space. Before Elon became political years ago, I heard him doing an interview and I loved what he said. The interviewer asked him, hey, how does it feel to, fail yet again, not accomplish your mission yet again? And he said, oh, we didn't fail. We didn't fail. We learned. We learned something, and we learned what not to do next time. We learned what we need to tweak next time. So allow people calculated risk. Becoming a resilient leader is being able to see those challenges and that adversity and just say, you know what? All right, we learned something, and take it as a lesson and move forward.
All right. Take it as a lesson and move forward. I believe in that word itself, failing forward. Failing forward is very,
Yes,
very important.
failing forward. Mhm.
Yeah. So as we begin to round off, it's been a very interesting conversation. So how do you help leaders develop self-awareness?
That's the hard one. I believe the most sincere form of respect or love even is when you're able to say the hard things out loud to somebody. It's like the emperor who wore no clothes kind of scenario. We can either just keep our mouth shut and not tell somebody what we see in them, some destructive traits and some destructive habits, or we can be truthful and say, here's what I see in you. Right. And the reason I'm telling you this is because I care for you and I respect you and I want you to get better. So one of the biggest ways is we don't see our own blind spots. I use the analogy of think about Tiger Woods, arguably the best golfer in the history of the world, right? And a fantastic golfer. But Tiger Woods had a coach. He had a coach. He worked with a coach. He probably knew more about golf than his coach did, or maybe not knew more about it, but was a better golfer than his coach was. But he had a coach because the coach was able to see his blind spots. And by seeing his blind spots, he would see when little bitty small bad habits started to develop. And because he got out in front of that bad habit, what happens with a little bad habit, if you don't fix it, it gets to be a big bad habit over time that can destroy you, ruin your chance of success. So that coach was able to see any bad habit that might be forming and get out in front of it and fix it before it becomes destructive. And I believe leaders all need somebody who can help them do that, somebody that they trust, who has their back, not being critical for being critical's sake or mean spirited, but literally in that whole vein of I'm doing this because I care about you, I respect you, and I want to see you get better.
Thank you so much. So as we begin to round off, just like I said earlier, I would want you to suggest 3 books our listeners can grab and learn more about this topic and about leadership.
So one of the very first books that I ever read on leadership was Darren Hardy's The Compound Effect. And I just think it's just fantastic. It talks about how we've all heard of Atomic Habits, also a great book, but The Compound Effect, it's a little different. Read it. You won't regret it. That's a great book. I love Simon Sinek, any of his books, actually. Of course, the first one I've read of his was Start With Why. I think it's fantastic. And then this is kind of a different book that I'll give you, but it's just one that popped into my mind that I like a lot. And it's The Tipping Point. I believe it's Daniel Pink. I can't remember right now if he's the author, but The Tipping Point, or maybe it's no, it's not. I can't remember who it is right now, but The Tipping Point is a fantastic book because it gives you a lot of insight into how things become popular, how things trends start. But as a leader, it's very important. It's one of those technical things that you do need to know.
Thank you for sharing. The last words, how can people reach out to you if they want to learn more about what you do? And for leaders listening today, what's one actionable step they can take tomorrow, if possible today, to strengthen their team's resilience?
So people can reach me at alpstra.com. That's ALPSTRA.com. Also, amypechacek.com. That's my speaker website. And then alpstra.com is our corporate training. I'm on LinkedIn. That's about it right now. I've been on some of the other social medias, but the only one that I'm kind of active on right now is LinkedIn. But you can also reach me at Amy, AMY, at Alpstra. Actionable step that you can take today is make an intentional decision that you're going to get better. Do something for yourself. Decide that, you know what, I'm worth 42 minutes out of my day. That can be on your way to work. It can be on your way home from work. It could be exercise. It could be reading. It could be listening to Jay's podcast. Whatever it is, invest at least 42 minutes in yourself every single day.
Right. That's just 42 minutes every day for yourself. It's not so bad. All right. And that brings us to the end of another insightful episode of the Winner Circle podcast. I also want to say thank you to you, Amy Pechacek, for joining us and sharing your powerful strategies on building resilient team that thrive under pressure. It's not just about leadership only. It's about empowering people, fostering trust, and creating a culture where teams can truly excel. I want to say, if today's conversation inspired you, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the Winner Circle podcast on your favorite platform, because your support helps us continue to bring inspiring leaders and practical strategies to listeners around the world. So I also want you to connect with us on social media and share your favorite takeaways or questions from this episode. We love hearing how these discussions help you take meaningful steps to elevate your leadership and team performance. I want to say thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Remember, strong teams, empowered leaders, and thriving organizations start with clarity, intentionality, and consistent action. Until next time, I'm your host, Jay Adewole, encouraging you to keep leading with purpose and building teams that truly thrive. Have a nice day, guys.